Hi, I'm April Lloyd. I am the plant recorder at the Houston Botanic Garden. My job here at the garden is to keep records of all of the plants that are planted in our gardens. Because we're a new garden, my story starts with when plants are selected, knowing where they came from and what exactly we're getting. I record when they arrive at the garden, I record when they're planted, and then over time I'll record how they grow, when they bloom, what types of insects come and visit them, as we build a database that helps us share and grow the plant knowledge in the Houston area. One of the things that makes the Botanic Garden not just your typical garden or city garden is that we're doing scientific research on plant communities. We're also documenting which plants we have and how they do in the area and what kinds of care conditions they receive and need to thrive. We take on some experimental plants to see how they work in the Houston area and generally work to build the scientific knowledge of our community. And we're excited to be here, collecting those records, building that knowledge database, and playing into the cultural and environmental projects in the Houston area. So when our landscape architects designed the garden, they laid out the beds. And then they came through and they did construction to build the beds, but on the other side we had a team that was working on which plants would actually go in each bed. And they chose for this bed a selection of pitcher plants. And they like an acidic soil, they like a lot of moisture, they like a lot of sun. And so we selected other plants to go with them. And when we planted it last October, we had 10 varieties of pitcher plants. 5 varieties of zephyranthes, which are a rain lily, and some sedges, and these beautiful pine trees. Then we watched over the first 6 months, we could see decline in some of the varieties of pitcher plant, that some of them liked our soils and some didn't. And in our assessment, we decided we'd pull out all of the pitcher plants that survived, we'd reassess the soils, we'd build a soil profile that we thought they would like better, and we'd replant. And so our goal is to have that same diversity, the different kinds of pitcher plants that are found in the U.S. in this bed in the next couple of months. So right now we have the soil out and have replaced it with a fresh, more acidic soil, and we're letting it stabilize, and we hope to replant very soon. And these beautiful pine trees are a type of pine called a Pinus Eliadia, and they can be distinguished from a loblolly pine or Pinus Eliadia by counting the number of needles in a bundle. So if you're looking at a pine tree like this, you're going to reach up, and if you check a selection of the needles on a slash pine or a Pinus Eliadii, they're going to have 2 needles per bundle on some of them and 3 on others. But a loblolly pine has 3 needles in every single bundle. So that is one of the ways you can tell the trees apart. They'll also eventually have redder bark than the loblolly pines, and their pine cones will be a little less prickly than the loblolly pines. This is one of my favorite plants here at the garden. This is in the red bed in our rainbow garden. And this is a Cuffia. It's commonly called bat-faced Cuffia because you can see a cute little face on the flower buds. Each display label has icons, and this one you can see that this plant likes to live in full sun, and it's going to attract hummingbirds and butterflies. One of the things that we've learned here is that the bees also love it, so when I get around to redoing these at some point, I'll add a bee icon to show how much they love this plant. You should be able to see some bees. A little later in the day we'll see a lot more butterflies, but they tend to like the slightly warmer temperatures, so they're not quite out yet. I have a little moth fluttering around here. There's a spider climbing right there. I want to talk about a tree that I grew up calling a toothache tree, called a Xanthoxylum clava herculis. It has common names like Hercules club and toothache tree, and it's native to Texas. And it was heavily used in native medicine because it has numbing properties. If you chew the bark or even the leaves or the seed pods, they have a numbing quality that was used for pain relief before pain relievers were readily available. And it's got an interesting connection to Chinese medicine and that wonderful numbing spice in Szechuan cooking. The same genus of tree is what is grown in China, and then the seed pods and the hulls for the seed pods are ground up and used in cooking as the numbing spice. So anybody who enjoys those yummy, hot, spicy Szechuan dishes has tasted the seed pods from this type of tree. This is a Butea capitata, or a pindo palm. Our pindo palms came to us from a company called Groundworks, and they were grown in the Houston area. They were actually grown in Alvin. They were started as seeds in the late winter of 2004. They're put in a greenhouse, and when the seeds germinate, they're grown in the greenhouse for a couple of years until they're about a 3-gallon size. And then they take them out and they plant them in the clay soils at Alvin for the next 13 years. And so these trees would have been grown in the Alvin area. They're used to being in Houston, they're used to our soils. When we went out to select them, we went and looked for specific forms, we looked for healthy trees, we looked for beautiful shape, and then we would go through and we would tag them so that they were marked on which ones we had picked out. They would field dig them and box them up, and then a couple of months later we had them here at the garden and we're planting them in this beautiful tropical area of our garden. So again, this is a pindo palm. It'll bloom and the flower stalks will hang down. It'll attract bees, and then it will have a lovely orange fruit that's edible, and the seeds from that are how our pindo palm started. I'm here in the Camellia Garden, and the Camellia Garden is the first area that was planted in the global garden at the Houston Botanic Garden. And the way this garden was planted was that starting early in 2019, they went out and tried to identify plants that would fill in. It was designed, and they were looking for pine trees that would grow into a lovely shady cover crop, tall camellias and short camellias that would make a multi-layered complex display. So over here I was going to point out one of our tags that we would specifically pick a tree and look at and tag it as one that we wanted for here at the garden. The same for the larger camellias, that each of them was selected individually to come to the garden. And then the plants were laid out so that we would plant the trees first. We would do the construction and the drainage and bring the soils in, then we plant the trees. Then the larger camellias, followed by the little shorter camellias. And these are set up to where there's a view each direction. So from that path, you'll see something different from up here. And that they're built to provide a vertical complexity in our garden. And we're really excited about how they're coming along, and the camellias are starting to bloom. One of the things I do here at the garden is resolve name issues when a plant comes in and we're not entirely sure that it's what the grower called it. And this is a great example of that. These are two plants that came in called cousinant. This one turns out to be an Acacia cognata, and this one turns out to be a Casuarina glauca. Both called the same common name. It's part of why we prefer to use scientific names in our tracking. And so all of my plant records are based on the scientific names, but I love to know where the stories of their common names came from, and think about how we use them and what they tell us. So in this case, they both represent that hair growth form, and we expect them to fill out and be pretty stunning over time.